For centuries, the mere whisper of its name was enough to chill the blood. The Spanish Inquisition, a tribunal cloaked in the authority of faith, yet notorious for cruelty, fear, and unimaginable suffering. It was born in fire, nurtured in paranoia, and unleashed upon countless men, women, and even children who dared, or were merely suspected, to believe differently than the dogma prescribed. To its defenders, it was a shield of the Catholic faith. To its victims, it was terror made flesh, a machinery of suspicion that invaded homes, tore apart families, and filled the air with the smoke of burning flesh. What made the Inquisition so diabolical was not only the brutality of its punishments, but the way it cloaked itself in righteousness. It was not bandits or tyrants who presided over the torture chambers, it was priests. It was not criminals who filled the dungeons, but scholars, Jews, Muslims, heretics, and ordinary people whispered against by their neighbors. Its power was absolute, its methods secret, its reach endless. And its legacy remains one of the darkest chapters in human history. Birth of the Inquisition, faith, fear, and the machinery of control. The Spanish Inquisition was formally established in 1478 by Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella of Castile, the Catholic monarchs who had unified Spain. To understand why it came into being, one must understand the Spain of their time, a land of victory, fear, and fragile unity. For centuries, Spain had been a mosaic of faiths, Christians, Jews, and Muslims living side by side. The Reconquista, the long struggle to reclaim the Iberian Peninsula from Muslim rule, had only recently come to its climax. Granada, the last Muslim stronghold, fell in 1492. For Ferdinand and Isabella, this was more than military conquest. It was a divine mission, a sign that God had chosen them to purify the land. But purity to them was not about tolerance, it was about conformity. At the heart of their fear were the conversos, Jews who had converted to Christianity, and the Moriscos, Muslims who had done the same. Officially, these people were now Christians, yet suspicion lingered. Were they secretly clinging to their old faiths? Were they corrupting true believers with hidden practices? The Inquisition was created to answer these questions, and to do so with merciless efficiency. The Inquisition was not an ordinary court. It was a tribunal of faith, accountable not to local authorities, but directly to the crown and the church. Its power was absolute. Once accused, a person's life ceased to be their own. There was no presumption of innocence, no fair trial, no open defense. The process was shrouded in secrecy. Witnesses remained anonymous. Evidence was withheld. Accusation alone was enough to summon the machinery of terror. The accused were hauled before inquisitors in dim chambers lit by candlelight, their judges robed not in royal garb, but in the vestments of the church. It was justice cloaked in holiness, a spectacle of divine authority wielded to crush dissent. What made the Inquisition truly diabolical was its reach. Fear spread like a contagion, for anyone could be accused. A whispered remark, a failure to attend Mass, a refusal to eat pork, seen as a sign of secret Jewish practice. These could condemn a person to investigation. Neighbors spied on neighbors, children on parents, servants on masters. The very fabric of society became a web of paranoia. To accuse another was to protect oneself. To confess under pressure was to hope for mercy, and mercy under the Inquisition was a relative term. Those accused were thrown into prisons infamous for their squalor. In Seville, Toledo, and other cities, dungeons overflowed with men and women awaiting judgment. Many waited months or years, shackled in dark cells, sustained on meager bread and water. Rats gnawed the straw where they slept. Disease festered. Their only light was the occasional opening of the door when guards dragged them to interrogation. For children torn from their parents, the darkness was worse. Alone, accused by association, they were raised not in homes but in cells, their lives marked forever by suspicion. Inquisition interrogations were designed not to find truth, but to force confession. The inquisitors believed, or claimed to believe, that torture purified the soul, extracting the lies of the flesh to reveal the truth of the spirit. And so the rack stretched limbs until joints popped, the strappado wrenched shoulders from their sockets, and water torture, an early form of waterboarding, filled lungs with liquid terror. Victims screamed in the name of Christ as priests stood nearby, urging them to confess for the sake of their souls. Many confessed anything, true or not, simply to end the agony. Others died before confessing, their silence carried as proof of guilt. But the most diabolical spectacle of all was the auto da fe, the act of faith. These were public ceremonies staged in town squares where sentences were read before massive crowds. Those found guilty were paraded in penitential robes, their heads shaved, their faces pale with terror. Some were flogged, others imprisoned, but many were handed over to the secular arm for execution, almost always by fire. Burning at the stake was the ultimate punishment of the Inquisition. It was not a quick death. Victims were tied to posts, surrounded by kindling, and set ablaze before the eyes of thousands. Families watched their kin consumed by flames. Children screamed as their parents burned. The crowd cheered, for this was not merely punishment, but theatre, the church's power made visible in smoke and ash. The auto da fe was as much about spectacle as it was about justice. It was designed to terrify, to remind the people that faith was not a private matter but a matter of life and death. By the end of the 15th century, the Inquisition had become a state within a state. Its officials were feared more than kings, its prisons more dreaded than battlefields. It had no borders, no limits, no mercy. It reached into the homes of peasants and the courts of nobles alike. Even priests and monks were not safe from its gaze, and above all, it was secret. The accused never knew their accusers, never knew the evidence, never knew the day their sentence would fall. They lived in a twilight world of suspicion, where innocence offered no shield, and silence was as dangerous as confession. This was the true diabolical genius of the Inquisition. It needed no armies to rule, only fear. Instruments of torture and methods of control, the diabolical machinery of the Inquisition. The Spanish Inquisition presented itself as the guardian of faith, but beneath its pious veneer lay a system built on fear, cruelty, and the breaking of human will. Its power did not rest only in the authority of church and crown, but in the chilling efficiency with which it manipulated bodies, minds, and communities. To understand the terror it unleashed, one must step into its dungeons, hear the creak of rope and wheel, and see how torture and ritual were transformed into tools of control. Once accused, a prisoner disappeared into the Inquisition's jails, dark, airless cells where days blurred into weeks, weeks into months. Isolation was itself a weapon. In the silence, rumors spread like poison, cries from nearby chambers, the clatter of chains, the muffled groans of other prisoners being tortured. Even before the first interrogation, fear gnawed at the accused. Food was meager, conditions filthy. Prisoners slept on stone or straw, often shackled. Some died before they ever faced trial, consumed by disease or despair. For those who survived, the torment was only beginning. The Inquisition justified its methods with a grim paradox. Torture was not punishment, but a means of discovering truth. They claimed no innocent would suffer, for the innocent, they believed, would be sustained by God. But in reality, pain cared little for innocence. The strappado was among the most common devices. The accused was bound with arms tied behind the back, hoisted high by a rope, then suddenly dropped, wrenching shoulders from sockets, tearing ligaments, leaving permanent injury. The rack, infamous across Europe, stretched the body until joints cracked, muscles tore, and screams filled the chamber. Another method was the toca, the precursor to modern waterboarding. A cloth was forced into the prisoner's mouth, water poured endlessly until they gagged, choked, and gasped for air. To those watching, it appeared as though the victim was drowning. The wheel, the thumbscrew, the iron boot, each tool was designed with a singular purpose: to break resistance. Few could withstand such agony without confessing, whether guilty or not. Inquisitors claimed these confessions as victories of truth. In reality, they were victories of terror. Torture did not end in the chamber. Humiliation was carefully staged. Prisoners were forced to wear the San Benito, a penitential garment painted with flames, demons, or grotesque symbols of their alleged heresies. They were paraded through towns, mocked by crowds, spat upon as living warnings. This public shaming extended beyond the individual. Families were branded with disgrace. Children of the accused were barred from public office, their names stained for generations. Property seized from the condemned enriched not only the Inquisition, but the crown itself, creating an economy of fear where accusation meant profit. The pinnacle of Inquisition ritual was the auto da fe, the act of faith. These were not quiet judgments, but public festivals of fear. Thousands gathered in plazas to witness the condemned paraded in their San Benitos, heads bowed beneath tall pointed hats. Judges read out charges in solemn tones. Priests exhorted the crowd to vigilance, and the accused were made examples of obedience and rebellion. Some were sentenced to penance, others to imprisonment, but the ultimate punishment was death. Officially, the church did not shed blood. Those condemned to die were handed over to secular authorities. In practice, this meant the stake. Prisoners were bound, wood piled high, flames lit as prayers rose into smoke. The crowd watched not only for justice, but for entertainment, their horror mingling with fascination. To attend an auto da fe was to be reminded of the Inquisition's reach. No one was beyond suspicion, no one beyond fear. What made the Inquisition so diabolically effective was not only its torture or executions, but its secrecy. Accusers were anonymous, evidence was hidden, trials were conducted behind closed doors. A man might be condemned by a jealous neighbor, a business rival, or a personal enemy, yet never know who had spoken against him. This secrecy sowed paranoia. Trust dissolved. Friends whispered cautiously. Families guarded their prayers. Communities fractured. Anyone could be accused, and anyone could be condemned. The Inquisition did not need to prosecute everyone. It needed only to make everyone afraid. The genius and horror of the Inquisition was its ability to turn fear into obedience. Torture ensured confessions. Public shaming destroyed reputations. Executions terrified the masses. Secrecy poisoned trust. Together, these elements formed a web from which there was no escape. It was not just bodies the Inquisition broke, but minds. People learned to censor themselves, to hide their thoughts, to betray even loved ones if it meant survival. Communities became self-policing, terrorized into conformity. The Inquisition became less a court of law than an omnipresent shadow, a nightmare that lingered in every prayer, every whisper, every silence. Though cloaked in the robes of religion, the Inquisition also served the monarchy. Ferdinand and Isabella and their successors used it to centralize power, silence dissent, and enrich their coffers. Each confiscated estate, each silenced critic, each terrified community strengthened the hand of the crown. Thus, the machinery of the Inquisition was not only spiritual, but political. It was not merely about heresy, but about control. And control, maintained through fear, was perhaps its most diabolical invention of all. The reach of terror from Spain to the New World. The Spanish Inquisition began as a weapon of control within Iberia, but its reach soon grew far wider. Like the empire it served, it expanded beyond Spain's borders, crossing seas and frontiers, spreading its methods to new lands and new peoples. The Inquisition was not a local institution, but an empire of fear in its own right, one that moved wherever Spanish power extended. By the early 16th century, the model of the Spanish Inquisition inspired imitators. Portugal established its own version in 1536, operating with similar methods and targeting similar groups: conversos, moriscos, and suspected heretics. Italian territories under Spanish control, Naples, Sicily, Sardinia, fell under inquisitorial authority, their cities darkened by tribunals and autos da fe. In the Netherlands, where Protestantism spread rapidly, the Inquisition became a hated instrument of repression. Its presence fueled rebellion, turning public resentment against Spanish rule. The revolt of the Low Countries, which would lead to the independence of the Dutch Republic, was in part a reaction to inquisitorial terror. Wherever it spread, the Inquisition left behind the same legacy: fear, division, and resentment. But its most chilling expansion came with Spain's conquest of the Americas. As ships carried soldiers, settlers, and priests across the Atlantic, the Inquisition followed. Its shadow fell on Mexico, Peru, Cartagena, Lima, and beyond. In these colonies, the Inquisition confronted not only Jews and Muslims, but indigenous peoples and African slaves. Though its official focus was on Europeans, anyone who came into contact with Christianity fell under its scrutiny. Indigenous traditions were branded as pagan, African rituals as witchcraft. Converts to Christianity were monitored relentlessly, accused of backsliding if they clung to ancestral customs. Witches, sorcerers, shamans, and healers, figures of spiritual authority in native cultures, became prime targets. Trials were staged, confessions extracted, punishments handed down. The Inquisition became a hammer, smashing indigenous spirituality in the name of Christian orthodoxy. Inquisitorial courts in the New World mirrored those in Spain. Tribunals were established in Mexico City, Lima, and Cartagena, with prisons, torture chambers, and public squares for executions. Autos da fe drew crowds just as in Spain, with accused paraded in San Benitos and condemned in fire. But here, the reach of the Inquisition was even broader. It not only targeted heretics, but policed morality itself. Blasphemy, adultery, bigamy, sodomy, even careless words spoken in anger could bring someone before its judges. Priests monitored confessionals, neighbors denounced neighbors. Communities learned that silence was the only safety. The colonial Inquisition reinforced Spain's power. It kept settlers loyal, suppressed dissent, and ensured that the conquered populations remained obedient. Just as in Spain, its purpose was not only to preserve the faith, but to preserve the empire. The genius and horror of the Inquisition's colonial role lay in its ability to merge religion with politics. To resist Spanish rule became, in effect, to resist God. To speak against the crown was to risk accusation of heresy. To cling to ancestral customs was to risk the stake. Indigenous people and Africans were trapped in a system where their cultures were criminalized, their voices silenced, their traditions suppressed. Entire communities lived under suspicion, watched by priests and informants, their identities slowly reshaped under the shadow of the tribunal. Records reveal the scale of this reach. In Mexico, between 1571 and 1700, hundreds were tried for heresy, blasphemy, and witchcraft. In Lima, thousands faced judgment. In Cartagena, the Inquisition became infamous for targeting enslaved Africans and their descendants, accusing them of sorcery and punishing them with brutal severity. The accused were rarely powerful. Most were poor, vulnerable, and voiceless. For them, the Inquisition was not an abstract institution, but a daily threat, a knock at the door, a whisper in the marketplace, a priest's suspicious gaze. By the 17th century, the Spanish Inquisition had become a global institution, its reach extending from Iberia to Italy, the Netherlands, North Africa, the Americas, and even the Philippines. It had become not only a court, but a culture of fear, secrecy, and submission. Its methods were always the same: accusation, secrecy, torture, confession, public spectacle. Its purpose was always the same: control. and its legacy was always the same: broken bodies, silenced voices, and societies ruled by fear. The Inquisition was no longer simply Spanish, it was imperial, it was global, it was terror on a scale Rome itself might have envied. The eternal terror and legacy of the Inquisition. The Spanish Inquisition did not vanish in a single moment. It lingered like a ghost for centuries after its peak, its machinery grinding on even as the world changed around it. From its beginnings in 1478 under Ferdinand and Isabella to its final abolition in the 19th century, it cast nearly 350 years of shadow across Spain and its empire. And in those centuries, it left scars that could never be erased. By the 17th century, the ferocity of the Inquisition began to wane. The great waves of persecution against conversos and Moriscos slowed, partly because so few remained. The expulsion of the Moriscos in 1609, hundreds of thousands forced from their homes, had gutted Spain of its diversity. The Inquisition still tried heretics, witches, blasphemers, and critics, but its trials grew smaller, its fires fewer. By the 18th century, the Enlightenment cast new light on its darkness. Philosophers like Voltaire and Montesquieu denounced it as tyranny in religious disguise. Foreign powers mocked Spain as a land chained by superstition and cruelty. Within Spain itself, critics began to whisper that the Inquisition was a relic of another age, an anchor dragging the nation backward. Finally, in 1834, under the regency of Maria Cristina, the Inquisition was formally abolished. Its prisons were emptied, its officials dispersed, its name consigned to history. But by then, its work was already complete. The Inquisition left scars deeper than executions or prisons. It had reshaped society itself. It taught generations to fear their neighbors, to silence their doubts, to betray even family if survival demanded it. It turned faith into a weapon, law into spectacle, and justice into theater. Communities that had once flourished, Jews, Muslims, Moriscos, were gone, their cultures scattered, their voices silenced. Intellectual life had been stifled, critical thought suppressed. Spain, once a crossroads of civilizations, emerged narrower, poorer, and haunted by the weight of its lost diversity. Even those who survived were marked. Families tainted by accusations carried shame for generations. Names recorded in inquisitorial ledgers became curses, barriers to honor and office. The fear the Inquisition had sown did not vanish with its abolition. It lingered in memory, whispered in households, etched into the bones of society. What makes the Inquisition so diabolical is not only what it did, but what it symbolized. It showed how fear could be institutionalized, how cruelty could be justified as piety, how torture and execution could be disguised as salvation. It revealed the fragility of freedom, the ease with which suspicion could become law, and law could become terror. The auto da fe, the stake, the rack, the secret denunciations, these were not accidents of history. They were deliberate tools, crafted to maintain obedience through dread. They remind us that tyranny is most terrifying when it wears the mask of virtue. Today, the very phrase Spanish Inquisition evokes dread. It has become shorthand for cruelty, secrecy, and oppression. It lives in memory not just as a historical institution, but as a warning that when fear becomes law and law becomes faith, humanity itself is endangered. The Inquisition claimed to save souls, but in truth, it destroyed them. It turned neighbors against neighbors, faith against compassion, justice against truth. It transformed prayer into suspicion and confession into agony. And though its prisons are empty and its courts long dissolved, its shadow remains. For history remembers not only the names of kings and queens, but the cries of those who were silenced. The Spanish Inquisition endures in our imagination because it represents the darkest possibility of power, when institutions meant to guide are twisted into engines of fear. In the end, the Spanish Inquisition was more than a court. It was a system, a culture, a reign of terror that spanned continents and centuries. It showed that cruelty can be ritualized, that violence can be sanctified, that entire societies can be ruled by whispers and shadows. Its legacy is a lesson written in fire and fear, that no empire, no religion, no nation is immune to the corruption of power. The Inquisition may be gone, but the terror it represents, the terror of secrecy, suspicion, and sanctioned cruelty, is eternal. Until next time, Vale, farewell.